My name is Scott Harris. I'm the pastor here at Grace Bible Church. I've been here for 31 years. I have a earned Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Biology and a Master of Divinity. For those who are not familiar with that, that's a 3-year postgraduate degree. My wife is a PHN. We've raised 3 sons. We homeschooled all 3. I'm not sure how that fits with the school board, but I have some questions about homeschooling for school boards too. One of my sons had a learning disability, so we're very familiar with all that takes place in education. My oldest has 2 masters. He has an MDiv and a master's in history. David has a master's in English and a New York State teaching credential. And my youngest one was not academic, and he makes more money than the other 2. Works with his hands. I am an advocate for homeschooling, but as a pastor of a church, we have always had people in every kind of educational institution, public, private, and homeschoolers. We've had many people in our congregation, and still do, that work in the educational fields, both private and public, in many districts, both in Dutchess County and in Westchester County. Our goal is simply to seek families, help families raise their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, because that's what's commanded of us, regardless of whatever the educational environment is. We maintain a good relationship with Myers Elementary School, which is directly next door, and my wife and I personally appreciated the help the district gave us with our learning disabled child many years ago in helping get a diagnosis and some ideas of how we could help him. Now, I say all those things simply to demonstrate that my family is very well aware of educational issues in many different areas, public, private, and homeschooling, and also academics. So a lot of the questions been developed have been from that mindset. Now, this started off as something very low-key. Dan gave me a call last Thursday, I think it was, and wanted to know about maybe doing a Zoom meeting, and I'm a big proponent of face-to-face meetings. So I said, well, how about just use the church and invite whoever you want. And then it kind of snowballed there. I thought it'd be a great opportunity for our church to meet others of like faith that are concerned about the issues in education from a biblical perspective. And this would be an opportunity to meet some candidates who would have the same kind of mindset that we could then endorse to the congregation, that these people that are like-minded with us. Then it got onto social media, and it kind of bloomed. I got in a kind of antagonistic call on Sunday morning, and then after the sermon on Sunday, my son was showing me all sorts of things that had already been put on the social media, clips of my sermon by people who wanted to be in opposition to what we stand for. And I'm like, all right, that's interesting. And then you told me that Carrie was at a board meeting, and we actually were in conflict with the school board meeting. Well, that's not a good idea. And so I delayed some things I'm supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be away today, but I thought this was more important. We want to make sure that there's an opportunity. I did not take care of whoever was invited. I just let that be open-ended, and everybody was welcome. I told the person who's antagonistic, anybody running for the board is welcome to be here. And conflicts in scheduling and last minute, we have 2, but I'm glad for the 2 we have. That gives you a lot of opportunity to be able to answer all these questions. I also found out from the social media that we were possibly going to have some antagonism here, and maybe even there was one group was supposed to be being planned to be here that was going to be in opposition and try a demonstration. So we called the troopers, they're here, our security team is here, and I thought, great, we can have them here, and if they will sign or at least agree to our code of conduct, we'll let them in, I can preach the gospel to them, because that's what preachers do, we preach. I do know there's signs around here that teachers should teach and not preach, but I'm a preacher. I preach, so I'd be looking forward to that, but it doesn't look like they showed up. Oh, well. Now I want to kind of go off on that a little bit. Why in the world would you need a code of conduct for something that in any normal community should just be standard? You meet, and you're civil to each other, and you respect each other, you show courtesy to each other. That should be normal. But that can be an issue. Why would anybody want to be discourteous to other people? Simple answer is sin. And that's a problem for everybody. Whether we had people picketing outside or not, the problem is sin. The sin's in every single one of us. Sure, there are particular issues that are a greater problem for you as an individual than it might be for somebody else. And the demonstration of that may vary a whole lot, but the problem still is sin. We don't do what God wants us to do. We have violated his commandments. And even a simple run through the 10 commandments demonstrates that. Anybody ever tell a lie? Probably easier. Anybody here not tell a lie? Well, of course. How many lies do you have to tell before you're a liar? One. Because that's human nature. Did anybody here have to teach your children to lie? No, it was just normal, right? Did you have to teach them to steal the things from the other kids while they're playing? No, I was normal too. Because it's in the heart of man ever since Adam and Eve fell into sin that's what's been transferred to each one of us. We have a sin problem. And it gets worse, whether it's adultery, whether it's not as many people commit physical adultery, but what about what Jesus said about committing adultery in your heart because you're looking on someone to lust after them? Not as many commit murder, but Jesus also escalated that if there's hatred, anger. You're expressing that anger, that you're actually liable for the same thing because God's standards are perfection and we just don't meet it. And those are the easy ones, because then you get into, do you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Do you love your neighbor as yourself? Jesus said on just those 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. And yet, that's not what we do. So idolatry, having other gods, something more important than God in front of us, is just the normal nature of humans. Romans states plainly, there are none good, that all have sinned. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 6 tells us the wages of sin is death. That began in the garden with a physical death, but eventually, after we pass from this life, it means an eternal death, eternal separation from the God who created us. That's not a good thing, but that's the consequence of sin. It's what we've earned. It's our wages. Unless there's been repentance and faith in Christ. And if you've never heard the gospel, I want to give you a very short explanation of it. Repentance is simply a change of mind that leads to a change of direction. It means I've changed my mind about myself, about Christ, and about righteousness. Our normal state as humans is that we think we're good enough, and we're not. We have to change our minds about that. We have to recognize that we have failed to keep God's perfect law because we can't do it. And to stumble on one point is to break all the law. We're guilty. To change our mind about Christ is to recognize who he is, that he is exactly who he said he is. He's God in human flesh, the second person, the triune Godhead, who became a man through the Virgin Mary, lived a sinless life, and then willingly died as a substitute for the payment of sin. Sin brings death. He died as a substitute payment for that. And because of that, he can offer forgiveness. Now, if he had stayed dead, there would have been a problem, because he would have died, and that only confirmed that he himself was not who he claimed and would have died in his own sin. But he rose from the dead, proving every claim he ever made about himself is true. And that means every promise he's made is also true. And so he can offer forgiveness because he's already paid the price. His ascension to heaven, he's now preparing a place for those who know him, that love him, and heaven will be our destiny. Heaven is the place he's called us to. For those that do not repent, that do not place their faith in him, well, the common term usually used for that is hell. It's a place of eternal torment and fire. It was not made for man. It was made for the devil and his angels, according to what Jesus said in Matthew 25. That's not where he wants us to go, and that's why Christ came. The example of perfect love, God demonstrated his love for us while we yet sinners. In rebellion against him, Christ died for us. But also an example of God's justice and judgment. The price still had to be paid, but he loved us enough to pay it himself. The difference between a non-Christian and a Christian boils down to simply faith and forgiveness, or unbelief and condemnation. There's no sin that you have done or can do that cannot be forgiven by Christ. He's already made the payment for you. It's a matter of what you believe and where your desires to go. If you change your mind about Christ, you recognize he is who he is, then there's a consequence of that. You'll want to follow him Because if he is God, and he is, well, he's sure a whole lot smarter than you and I, right? He has designed us. It's better to go his direction and follow the designer's work than trying to figure it out your own way. You know, if first you don't succeed, read the directions. Well, we haven't succeeded. We need the directions, and he's given it to us in his word, and he will guide us. The true Christian is changed in heart, and so that desire then becomes a normal one. We just want to walk with Christ. And that is the reason we hold to a different standard of how to live, and the reason that we can live a different way than we did before. I'm not the man I was before I was saved. And it's been a joy over the years to watch a lot of people change radically from what they were. If John Spillieri was here, I'd have him come up because he spent his life as a drunk. And he is the happiest guy you'd ever want to meet now because he knows Christ. His life is radically changed. Same offer is made to anyone. Jesus said it simply in John 3:16, didn't he? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So if you don't know the Savior, if you don't know Christ as your Savior, talk with me after, and I'd be happy to introduce you to him. But that also then figures into why we're doing this. Our concern is glorifying our Lord, and when it comes to stuff in our community, we know that God's standards are better than human standards, period. Whatever we kind of come up with, God's standards are going to be better. So it's better if we try to match what God says rather than come up with something on our own. And so tonight we're going to be conducting this meeting with each candidate. We're going to give you time to introduce yourself and then state maybe briefly why you even want to do this. I'm going to tell you this at the beginning. I have the highest respect for anyone that would serve in a public office. And school boards may even more because you have to sit there and take it from all these people coming up and saying things to you that aren't usually nice. And yet you're willing to do it. And so I have the highest respect for you. Thank you for serving. I'll just start right there. So I'm going to give you a chance then to say why you want to continue to do it, why you're willing to do that. And then I have a series of questions, and we're going to let you respond to those. That would be good for the people that would support the kind of worldview that I have, a biblical one. And if you don't agree with our premise, just state so. And that might sway some other voters who might like the other way. So we are not politically biased here, but we're very biased toward the scriptures. So that's the purpose of this meeting. We are recording it, so we'll make that available to you so that you can promote it yourself, or not promote it, depending if you liked your answers or not, but we'll let you have that. And then at the end, we'll allow you to make a final statement of why we should vote for you. And then we'll adjourn, and then I got lots of stuff downstairs to eat, so I hope we're hungry by then and everybody can join us, and that'll be the meet and greet, and you can all ask any personal questions you have of them. We will not be taking questions from the audience up here. You can ask them directly, okay? And that's in keeping with the original plan. All right, let me pray, and then we're going to get to the questions, okay? Father, thank you for the opportunity. In every situation, opportunities come up, and we are grateful for them. And Father, whether it's one of people present physically or those who might see this later on, we thank you for the opportunity to be able to declare what is true. Father, I thank you for both Carrie and Daniel of being willing to come out. I know there was some conflict for some of the others that could not come. But Father, that their willingness to even serve in a public office, to run for an office, it's not an easy thing to do in any way, shape, or form. Father, I would ask you to give them wisdom tonight as they answer these questions. Let them be articulate in expressing the things they believe and why they believe it. And Father, then even in advance for the election on, I believe it's May 17th, that you will install exactly those people that you want to be serving on this board. In Jesus' name, amen. So ladies first, Carrie?
First of all, thank you, Pastor Harris, for being gracious enough to open your church and being as hospitable as you've been and just providing the space and the opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan, for joining me, and thank you, everyone who came. I am, as it states there in front of me, I'm Carrie Cahill, and I'm actually a current Wappinger Central School District Board of Ed trustee only since last year. So last year I ran as an independent, um, and to the dismay of a very long-standing, almost decade-long trustee, I beat him out. Unfortunately, there were 4 spots, and I did win the 4th of the 4 as far as number of votes. So there were 3 3-year terms, and then my term, which was 1.x years. So that's why I'm running again. I personally foregoed the union endorsement because I do not align myself with their values. That's neither here nor there. I just personally am running on my principles. This is not a popularity contest. This is not some kind of an imagined power gain for me. This began for me as a crusade for my rights as a parent of 4 Wappinger Central School District students. They are currently ages 13 to 19. As I witnessed the unfolding of COVID in 2020, as I say it, I was white knuckling. It took me a week or 2 to really find out. God gave me some instincts as a mom. And I knew pretty soon that I needed to count the cost of isolating my kids, and what was unfolding in front of me, I just instinctively knew it was wrong. So I found a lot of like-minded parents after kind of feeling like I was an island for a while. On an island, I found out there were a lot of parents that actually felt this way. So I began this movement. I tripped over Ann not long before it was time to win this thing, and here we are right now. I am very passionate about being a mom and the rights that were bestowed on me. As I stated to you, Pastor, these children are on loan to us, and we have to do the right thing by them. And there are 4 of them counting on me to exercise my rights as a parent, and that's what I'm about. So, I have a business background, and I do have a degree from the University of Maryland. So I have 2 things going for me, and that is, exercising parental rights and certainly fiscal responsibility. These are my pillars, if you will. I wrote some things down, but that's basically me in a nutshell. I'm very, very passionate about, kind of disrupting things, creating a positive tension. As I shared with the gentleman here, that's how innovation and progress happen. If you look back hundreds of years, look at the Boston Tea Party. Where would we be today if someone didn't shake things up a little bit? So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I hope I captured everything. Thank you.
I had to look for a job, and so I started teaching. And I had been teaching before. I really do like teaching. I teach at college level. I enjoy it a lot. I've also tutored younger children. You guys remember there was the Sylvan Learning Center up on Route 9. I tutored there. I have taught high school. And I've even taught adults trying to get their GED in Spanish. So I've seen a lot of different aspects, and there's a lot of diversity that I've seen. But one of the things that I've noticed as I teach college classes and I see incoming freshmen is that they're not prepared for the college, the challenges that colleges present to them. Many of them have difficulty doing simple arithmetic. They have a hard time writing and reading and articulating and expressing themselves. And so it makes me wonder what's going on in the lower grades. And at the same time, my school taxes keep going up. So it makes me wonder what I'm paying for. So that's one of the reasons why I'm running. And then, of course, very recently, and it just seems that with COVID seemed to stir up a lot of things. Now we're hearing about this critical race theory, gender fluidity. Parents are being called terrorists because they want to speak out at board meetings, things like that. And so I can't say honestly, that I really want to be a school board member, but I use the analogy that, if you ask a person that's got a flat tire why you want to buy new tires, well, it's because the old one's broken. And that's what I think is happening here. I think that we're on the decline as far as the educational system goes. And so I feel compelled, and I do feel that this is a call from God. And so in order to sleep better at night, I figure I'd better follow God's direction rather than my own. So. Yeah.
All right, first question. Children are a gift from the Lord to the parents, Psalm 127. And the Lord commands the parents to raise their children to nurture, training, his admonition, discipline, Ephesians 6:4. This is a very serious issue. In fact, it's so serious that it's a qualification for church leaders. They have to be able to demonstrate they manage their homes well. There has been an effort that I have noticed to push the idea in the government and school boards are responsible for the welfare of our children.
Pastor, can you please turn on your microphone?
I'm sorry. Is that on? Okay.
Could you repeat the question?
I will repeat the question. Children are a gift, right from the start here. Children are a gift from the Lord to the parents, Psalm 127. The Lord commands the parents to raise their children as nurture and admonition. That's Ephesians 6:4. It's serious enough that it's actually a qualification for church leadership. The man has to be able to demonstrate that he is a good manager of his home. It's his responsibility. I have noticed that there is an effort pushing an idea that government school districts are somehow responsible for the welfare of our children. So 2 questions. A, what do you believe is the fundamental purpose of the local public school? And B, what are the boundaries of responsibility for the local public school in carrying out its purpose? All right, Carrie, we'll go with you first.
I made an assumption that it was me answering first, getting on my mark. I looked at the series of questions here on the sheet, and so many of them are answered in a very similar fashion for me. My hope, understanding historically, desire, want would be that the public schools provide an education of the core academic curriculum, period. So I agree with the opening of the question, as I stated in my opening remarks. The school needs to teach math, science, and history, as we've always known it, period. The fundamental purpose is for them to do that. The boundaries are that they don't do that, that happens at home with the families. Whether it's a traditional family or there are other caregivers, however it's sliced and diced in this day and age, it doesn't belong in the school. What belongs in the school is math, science, history, core subjects, a little phys ed thrown in there, the end. Thank you.
Again, what she said. This is kind of a relatively new idea that somehow the government is responsible for the welfare of a child. And you have to wonder where that comes from. Again, I think Pastor said it very simply. It's that it's a sin issue. Unfortunately, some parents have not taken the best care of their children, and we know of a whole lot of situations like that. And somehow the government feels that it needs to step in, which might be a good idea, except that the government is really a secular organization, and so we can. And so what we have now is basically an atheistic agenda trying to educate our children, okay? Even those children that are being raised by God-fearing parents. So they feel the need to step in for that. What do I believe is the fundamental purpose of a local public school? as Carrie said, it is to educate our children. It's educate our children, give them a good foundation so they can go on to the higher grades and eventually a job. Again, not necessarily college, but just give them the fundamentals to succeed in life. Learn how to read, learn how to write, learn how to do mathematics so that somebody will not come and take all their money, learn how to understand things like a mortgage, interest rates, things like that, I think are a good purpose for public schools. But all in all, I think that the public schools are there to shore up what parents want for their children. Again, another analogy is that you know, we take care of our cars, but we can send them to the car wash to get cleaned up, okay? And so again, we take care of the children, the parents take care of the children, but they send them to school to shine them up a bit. And again, what are the boundaries of responsibility for the local public school in carrying out its purpose? Again, everything should be for the benefit of the children. Once you start talking about the benefit of the state, then you're not thinking about the benefit of the children anymore. So if you're talking about educating children so that they can conform to society or to some norm, some governmental norm, or to simply look at it as simply job training to fulfill some pigeonhole within government, I think that's where the public schools sort of exceed their responsibility there. Oh, okay. Was I? Yeah.
Question two, there have been school districts and school employees that have been involved in non-emergency medical matters of underage children, those under 18. I don't know about this district, but I know nationally this just keeps popping up in the news, and it has been for some years. That includes taking them to get abortions, and more recently, the COVID-19 emergency youth authorization injections without parental consent or knowledge. Two questions. A, what boundaries do you believe should exist between a school district or its employees being involved in any non-emergency medical matter without parental consent? And B, what should be the consequences for those that do violate those boundaries?
My turn?
Yep, your turn.
Okay, so I'm glad to see that in your question you refer to it as an injection and not a vaccine, because that's exactly what it is. It's this COVID, what people are calling a COVID vaccine is really a gene therapy injection. I remember when GMOs started coming out and people were outraged about that. You know, there were a lot of protests, and I remember in Europe there were riots over that. People were throwing Molotov cocktails. But somehow it's okay to inject yourself with a foreign piece of either DNA or RNA, and if you don't do it, then there's something wrong with you. Okay, but anyway, so as far as the boundaries go. Yeah, I think that all of this, anything that is a non-emergency medical matter should be under the purview of the parent. Okay, parents need to be aware of these things, and administrators, teachers, nurses should not be touching the child without the parent's permission, period. And what are the consequences for those that do violate those boundaries? Personally, I think, and this may sound harsh, but I think jail time. You touch a child that you're not supposed to in a way that you haven't been given permission to do so. You know, if a man did that to a woman in the workplace, you know, that would be harassment, and there would be consequences to that. And I think those same consequences should exist here.
what Dan said. First, I wanted to say that if you noticed I was fiddling with my phone, it's because I actually wanted to pull up some pretty important stuff here. You know, I'm not on Facebook, and I've heard tell that there are some questions about, well, what does this Carrie Cahill mean about parents' rights, and what are the problem with our parental rights? I don't see any issue with my rights. Okay. So, anyway, yeah. So I haven't been able to answer these things on Facebook, and I want to just, this, you know, speaks to kind of where I'm coming from. So I appreciate it. Just so that everyone's aware, here's a snapshot of what they're trying to do in Albany to further rescind our parental rights, right? So here's some suggested legislation. Assembly Bill A8378, forced COVID shot mandates to attend school. Now, we know that right now there's a stay on that, we're okay. But let's go down the list, because this list is a little bit, you know, from earlier in the year. But, you know, there's another bill, forces all adult vaccine records, forget that one, not kids, hold on. Okay, flu shots to forced flu shots to attend school and preschool or daycare. Eliminating religious exemptions altogether, eliminating parents' consent to shots when a child reaches 14 years of age. Eliminate parents' right to consent to STD shots for children of any age. Assembly Bill A416. That is for all of us. And so allowing the governor to imprison without trial anyone she considers a threat to public health. Then, of course, the final one, which is eliminating unvaccinated people's access to health insurance. But there were a couple here mentioned related to our young people. The point is there have been clinics locally to vaccinate these kids in our schools. This is, without question, just what happens if these children are that young and they undergo a procedure, i.e. an abortion, or a vaccine or something like that, and then they show up on my doorstep. And then I'm responsible for what happens to these kids on the heels of something that as a minor child, they were able to do at the hands of people that aren't responsible for the outcomes of these things. It's absurd when you consider what could happen to these young people if these things are done without our consent. Consequences, yeah, big time. We don't have enough consequences in our country, but there's got to be some serious, severe consequences. I agree with Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, some of those cases are really tragic. One that comes to my mind was a girl was taken from school, had an abortion, and that night, the parents knew nothing about it. She bled out and died. Parents didn't even know it was wrong. Speaking of medical matters, what rights belong to parents regard to mandatory masking of their children, mandatory quote-unquote vaccine, well, vaccines in general, mandatory emergency use authorization medical products, so-called COVID vaccines, what exemptions, accommodations should be made for parents against such mandates, medical, religious, philosophical, science? What do you think? So we'll flip back to Carrie first. We'll go back and forth that way.
So without pumping the brakes, my oldest son graduated in 2020, so you know, he was 4 going on 5 years old. Bright little guy whose grandparents were both retired teachers and thought, you need to not wait another year, just get this kid into kindergarten. He's got all his shots. All of my children got all of their shots without me pumping the brakes. So COVID had me do a big V8 smack to my forehead on a lot of levels and for a lot of things and a lot of reasons. And one of which is the vaccines. I didn't see these mandatory vaccines as an issue then. As a matter of fact, until COVID, every year I got the flu shot for all of us, without question. I trusted medical science, I did it. I don't even know if I trusted medical science as much as it was just a knee-jerk thing that I did. I think there needs to be, I don't think this one's cut and dry for me. I think that the STD shots, I think the COVID shot, these ones are they're cut and dry for me. if my daughter were mandated as a 7th grader to get the COVID shot, I was pulling her out of school. I don't want my daughter or any of my children to get the shot. I personally don't want the shot. But when it comes to, there's measles, if we're talking in terms of measles, mumps, rubella, that kind of stuff, I don't know that I can give you a firm answer. I know that there are homeschooling parents that believe that it's their right and their choice not to do that. And see, that's a parental right. That's a parental choice. I don't think we need to force these kids into school buildings and they all have to have their shots. That's a sticky one. I have very close friends that kept their kids out of school because of the shots. And again, I'm awake now. So I feel very differently than I did years ago on this.
Okay.
I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, I am not anti-vax.
The
I think
microphone,
excuse me.
for the recording, use the microphone.
I think I'm not anti-vax, and I think that vaccines have actually saved a lot of lives. However, to insist on 5 or 6 or 7 vaccines before a child is the age of 5, I think is a little bit, I think is ludicrous. I think you don't. I don't think that you have to vaccinate essentially babies with so many different vaccines. And part of the reason is that again, they're just developing and their immune system is developing. So we don't know how these vaccines are going to affect them and their development. And again, I still also believe in parental freedoms. If a parent doesn't want their child vaccinated, I don't think they should have to be vaccinated. And that's, again, I'm not anti-vax, I'm pro-freedom. Now, about this mandatory emergency use authorization, COVID was not an emergency, especially when it came to children. Children survived the COVID infection very well. Many of them had very few symptoms. And, the death rate in young children due to COVID is extremely, extremely low. I don't think that that's an emergency. And again, it's not a vaccine. It's a gene therapy injection. And so, again, I do think that exceptions should be made if parents don't want their children vaccinated, or if they're, and again, some parents may want their children vaccinated, but not on that rigorous schedule that medical authorities would have you believe is necessary. That's my answer.
Okay, I'll add that my introduction to Dan was you were teaching biology to my son. So you're speaking as a biologist.
I am.
Okay, just so that's there. So just a follow-up on that one. So exemptions, accommodations for various things, medical exemptions, religious exemptions. I get the sense even for a philosophical exemption, and certainly based on science, should be available.
Yes, I personally got a religious exemption from work. Yes, I think that they should be.
Okay.
And I also got a religious exemption for the COVID injection.
All right. Number 3, sex education has been a controversy in public schools for many decades. This is in part because there are inherent moral components to teaching which, if not handled carefully, easily become promotion of extramarital sexual activity, which God has made very clear throughout the Scriptures is sinful. Leviticus 18 in the Old Testament, 1 Corinthians 6:9 in the New Testament. So a series of questions here. What role do you believe public schools should have in sex education? Should sex education extend beyond basic biology, and if so, to what? C, what ages are appropriate for such sex education? And D, what notifications, accommodations should be made for families that do not want their children to receive such instruction? All right, so Dan.
Okay, so again, I think that that sex in the marital bounds is a great gift from God. However, you have a government here that is secular, that in my mind is atheistic. It didn't start out that way, but it's headed that way now. And so they're not going to teach the same things that we would teach with a biblical worldview. And in fact, I actually see the promotion of sex outside of marriage, which is a big mistake. It just, you know, I mean, just thinking about it from a medical view, how many STDs could you avoid if essentially children were to remain celibate and wait until marriage? What role do I believe public schools should have in sex education? Well, I think it should simply be biological. It is part of biology, and I think that it should be taught in that sense. But with respect to any emotional, spiritual, I think all of those aspects of sex should really be taught by the parent. I think that is the parent's responsibility. And if parents need help, I think they should go get help from a teacher, and so that they can explain it to the children. Should sex education extend beyond basic biology? I don't really see. I wouldn't want. I don't have children. If I had children, I wouldn't want them to learn about sex or any of the other aspects about sex from an institution. Okay. I think that parents know their children best, and the way that information like that will be received by certain children, well, you know, one size doesn't fit all. So if they're simply going to describe sex and sexual acts and sexual mores through some lesson plan, I don't think that's going to work for every child. What ages are appropriate for sex education? I think probably just prior to puberty, so that children are aware of what's going to go on with their bodies, and what notifications and accommodations. Yeah, parents should be notified, and again, if parents don't want the children to hear that about sex education in the classroom, they should have, again, the freedom to pull their children out for that lesson. That's my answer.
Something that should have been woven in much earlier, and I think it's important here. So our country is founded on Christian values. You can't shoot holes in that, right? And so there's been a lot of talk to, you know, on the adversarial side of, well, you know, what is all this God talk surrounding the school board election? But I think that's important to mention here, and just remember throughout. This is not some novel concept that we're infusing into, you know, our country, our schools. It's in the pledge. It's in many things that we do, at least for now. So anyway, based on that, and returning to the fact that many of these topics, I believe, sex, moral values, you know, whether there's racist or bigoted, you know, things that, you know, are concerns, these things should be at home. I think there's a perversion and hypersexualization of children that are way too young to consume this information. And not to jump ahead, but maybe I'm a little bit of a type A. And on the other side, you know, we talk, there's a question about that. You know, why is this happening? Why are these children in pain and in conflict? Because we're doing this too early. So what role do I believe that public schools have in sex education? I want to thank Dan for, you know, and just kind of amplify what he said. It's anatomy, physiology, biology, period, right? But the part that I appreciated that he said, I would have said later. I would have said high school. As we discussed earlier too, our brains are not even fully developed till we're 25 years old. Why would you take young people and introduce these concepts to them? So when Dan said prepubescent, maybe pubescent age children, because they are children, maybe that is a good time, but I would have said a little bit later. But again, anatomy, physiology, biology, should sex education extend beyond that? No. That's all they should discuss in school. And I even have a hard time saying that. I want my kids to hear it from me, but I'm not a scientist and I'm not a teacher. But again, I have instincts because I got those from God. What ages are appropriate for sex education? As we stated, what notifications and accommodations should be made for families that do not want their children to receive such instruction? I wish that we didn't even have to consider that, right? I think that there should be boundaries with this. Notifications all day long. I don't know, calls, emails, a lot of hyper communication to that effect so that we know that this stuff's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is sort of a follow-up of that. If such education is part of a public school curriculum, who should teach such classes or seminars? Different groups have gone into the schools. Planned Parenthood's a big one. Crisis pregnancy centers sometimes get access for an abstinence, or should religious organizations? They all have different philosophies about it. Should all philosophies be taught? Only one? What's age appropriate? You're going to have a seminar.
My answer is very simple, so
Okay.
I'm going to take this one, Dan. I think a professional educator, I think a science teacher, and I think it has to be broad and more anatomy and physiology, and this is what happens. If we can't infuse our Christian values into this, then we'll keep it that benign state, and that's it.
Okay. Dan?
You know, if you think about it, the very first commandment that God gave to Adam and Eve was that they should not partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So does this mean that knowledge is bad? I don't think that that's what it means. I just don't think that at that time, Adam and Eve would be responsive to eating of that tree. Teaching kids about sex is not a bad thing, but it has to be done at the appropriate time. And it has to be done under appropriate conditions, loving conditions, not from an institution. So I think it's the responsibility of the parents. So if sex education is to be part of the public school curriculum, no, it should not be part of the school curriculum. Again, it should be taught as the science, the anatomy, the physiology, and probably high school would be a good time. You know, I'd say pre-puberty so that students will understand, but you know, they can understand afterwards what their bodies are going through. Yeah, I don't think that students need to be accosted with different points of view about sex. They will be making up their own point of view based on what their parents taught them.
Very good. So if I can summarize, it shouldn't be taught. And if it is an accommodation, so that it's not forced on kids. It's parental responsibility. Is that a fair assessment then? Okay.
Amen.
All right, 5. The scriptures are clear that God made man male and female, Genesis 1:27 and Matthew 19:4. It's a fact backed up by basic genetic biology of humans. Those who have 2 X sex chromosomes are female, and those with an X and Y are males. Yet gender dysphoria is an increasing phenomenon in the current generation. Great controversy has been generated in how schools should respond to this. So there's quite a few questions related to this. A, what resources should be made available for a child with gender dysphoria? Should the school affirm, deny, or remain neutral in the confusion of a child with gender dysphoria? C, should a school allow students who have gender dysphoria to be allowed to use bathrooms and changing facilities or participate in single-sex athletics that are contradictory to their actual genetic and biological makeup? All right, Dan, you get to go first on that. Oh, wait.
Okay.
There's also 2 more. Now,
Yeah.
well, tell you what, let's take those and then we'll take the ones on the next page on the other side. You're the biologist, so I guess you're the good one to hit on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I think gender dysphoria is a fabrication. Guys, there's only 2 genders, male and female, you know, and we're stuck with each other. So Yeah, I don't know what the plan is. Why would you confuse a child by opening these options when they don't even understand their place in the world yet? You know, whether you're a boy or a girl or something in between. I really don't understand that. And so I think that this is a fabrication. I think that this is something that's being introduced into young children's minds to really confuse them about their own place in the world and to increase their reliance on this new agenda that's coming up, this atheistic agenda. Sounds like a conspiracy? It is. It is a conspiracy. So that's basically my answer. Now, having said that, there are going to be some parents that insist that their children are something other than they're not. And something here about the use of, was it, or maybe it was the next question, something about the use of pronouns. I think that to control language is a very dangerous thing. If you control language, you start controlling the way that people think. And so I don't think that people should be forced into using particular pronouns or things like that. And obviously, you know, this is, you know, this almost comes to the point of being silly as to which bathroom that children are going to be using or which changing facilities. Again, if a boy is calling himself a girl, should be allowed in the girls' locker room? Absolutely not. Okay, and we know what's happened already. We've seen the news reports. If if the community or the parents are insisting on that, then they're going to have to pay for a third changing room, just for the transgender people. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't want my taxes going to that. So.
Thanks, Dan. This is clearly on the rise. Why is that? Because of all of the loose, perverted, hypersexual introduction being made at these really young ages where it's just, I mean, it's just blasphemy that they would ever have these concepts that the kids don't even know, they don't even know what's coming at them. And it's to promote further fracturing, right, in our society, dissension, division, confusion. I mean, it's clear. And if you can't see that, maybe some eye drops. It's opportunistic also, I think, unfortunately, that we would have to worry about the bathroom facilities. I don't want my daughter sharing a bathroom with an individual that is not of the same sex as my daughter. I mean, that's just without question. So I don't know, some might say there's a little bit of opportunistic stuff there. Sports, unbelievable. Absolutely not, without question, that's opportunistic. That's, I mean, this is, no. How far is it going to go? And when is it going to end? And the pronouns and things, I refuse to answer those questions. Yeah, that's my take.
Okay, very good. Yeah, some of these are topics you don't even want to talk about, and yet they're being thrust on us, so schools have to be able to respond to these things, and those on the board have to give the direction to the school about what's going to happen, what's appropriate to happen, and no matter which way you go, you're going to get a lot of pushback. 6, truth is important to God since he is the God of truth. Jesus is the truth, the life, and the way, and the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth. Accurate history is part of the pursuit of truth. What are your views about historical revisionism, such as the 1619 Project and Howard Zinn's books that are very seriously flawed historically, and yet widely used to disparage actual history? How should curriculum be reviewed in the pursuit of accuracy of truth? So Carrie, I think that kind of goes back to something you were talking about a little bit earlier.
So, reframing American history, why would we do something like that? I've learned most personally from walking into walls, from coming up against some adversity, from the things that I didn't do right, that I'll make sure I don't do those things again. We learn a lot from our history, from a lot of the mistakes that were made throughout history. Why would we look to reframe American history? There's a lot of beautiful things that have come out of some of the ashes. And I also know that to take the pain and the experiences and all of these things and sort of evaporate them as if they didn't happen, as if to say that many people didn't suffer and we didn't rise. And I think that to maintain our American history as it is to say, well, and no one's washed their hands and said that these things don't, there's still, unfortunately, things that exist today that existed hundreds of years ago. And we're still learning. But we certainly shouldn't reframe, erase, manipulate, manufacture, and then perhaps assume guilt. I personally am not guilty of things of my forefathers, that they did. And like you said, we commit sins, and I still commit sins today, but I didn't commit those sins. And so why should I stand in judgment and responsibility for sins that were committed many, many years ago? Let's learn from it. Let's continue to grow from it. Let's not forget about it, but certainly let's not assign blame to me sitting here today or to you or any one of us. So.
Okay, the second part of that question was how would a curriculum be reviewed in pursuit of truth? Because somehow you have to keep those books out, and then what books would you use? What principles would you use for an avocation of a curriculum review for good history books?
I believe that what we've been using, it's not broken. So why would we look to manipulate or fix something that's not broken? Unfortunately, sitting on the school board, I don't, nor do the other members, have a say in curriculum. We can advocate for certain things, and that's another unfortunate circumstance that relates to that. There is an assistant superintendent that's responsible for curriculum, and New York State does a lot to dictate these things. So yes, we can create advocacy, pushback, so on and so forth, as you've seen recently. But as far as I'm concerned, the curriculum was intact. We were presenting history as it was written and reviewed for decades, centuries even, and leave it.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, I essentially agree. I think that, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think that we should always be doing research, maybe finding out new facts and things about trying to fill in the holes of the holes in history that we don't know about. But for the most part, I don't see why we do have to change it. And what you're saying here about truth being important to God. Let's see here. So I'm just going to quote again from one of my favorite books, Genesis. The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the tree in the gardens, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must touch it or you will die." "You will certainly not die," said the serpent to the woman. So really, this is the way that Satan gets to us, by lying. This is what's happening right here. What they're spreading is a bunch of lies. Again, and I don't really know why. What is the whole point of this? So that we love our country less, and we fall in love with what? I don't understand. But I agree with Carrie that this, I think that, what I learned in history, I grew up loving this country. My parents love this country. They came over many years ago, and they became Americans. Both of them became citizens, and they knew their history. Probably knew their history better than people that were born here. and they love this country. They would be turning over in their graves right now if they knew what was happening. But no, I don't think there needs to be any revision at all, quite frankly. Keep studying history, that's all.
So you would agree with Carrie that though you can't set curriculum, you can be do advocacy for curriculum change and making sure it's staying
Yeah, I
with-
think that we can push back, and I think that we can
Okay.
push back hard. Yeah, and we need to, as a school board member, hopefully I'll be able to motivate those that voted for me, and like I said, to push back hard against Albany. We're still the taxpayers. They depend on us, not the other way around.
All right. The scriptures are clear that all humans are one race, being of one blood, for all are descended from the same parents, Adam and Eve. Partiality is a sinful practice, whether its basis is ethnicity or financial status. That comes from James. What is your position on the use of ideas such as critical race theory and intersectionality, which purposely promote partiality, racism, and a Marxist political philosophy of oppressed and oppressors in the pursuit of equity, that's equality of outcome, instead of fairness and treating everyone the same manner with the same rights under the law? Do you have any ideas about how public schools can help reduce partiality related to ethnic origins? So there's two parts to that question.
I think that, so my position on critical race theory and the intersectionality, I wish we weren't even talking about it. To me, this shouldn't be something, we have X amount of units of energy every single day, and we shouldn't even be having this conversation. So my position on it is it's nonsense. The second part of that question is the inverse of the first part. My answer is the inverse. If we are all of this faith and belief that God did create us in the way that he did, and we are all, humankind. However, there's diversity built in. We're all so very different. We're different in the way that we talk, look, feel, love, express ourselves. We should honor that, embrace it. That's what should be proliferated. If you look at, so do I have any ideas about how public schools can help reduce partiality? Yes, honor and embrace the differences, the diversity. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, that's how innovation and progress happen. You have an intersection of perhaps different ideas and beliefs and opinions, and beautiful things happen, right? You look at an orchestra. There's not one instrument. There's many different types of instruments. And the maestro makes some beautiful music happen. They all have the instrument that they have. They play what they play, and together, it's a wonderful thing. So I think that we should honor, embrace the differences and the diversity. Thank you.
Yeah, how to reduce partiality related to ethnic origins? Don't make it an issue. It doesn't have to be an issue. What's the conversation going to be about? I don't understand. I really don't understand. And people that promote critical race theory, guys, those are the true racists. They're the ones that are creating a division right there. I just marvel at some of the things that we're arguing about. There's so many issues. We still have homelessness. We have the sex trade. We have drug abuse. All these issues that even the environment. All of these issues that we had when we were growing up, and it just seems like now we're getting more issues. And we're arguing about things like, critical race theory, or what bathroom are we going to use? Something. It really is sad. And this is why I'm running, guys. This is why I'm running. Hopefully to bring back some common sense. It just seems to me that all the adults have left the room, and we have children making decisions right now.
Okay, so you've already explained about the curriculum, and it's basically decided not by the board, which is a shame. It should be in the local area. But what about library reviews? What happens when there's determining that, how do you determine what books are appropriate to have in the library? And then how do you handle parental complaints about what is in there or other resources that come out? So, Dan, we go with you first.
Sure. Taking a book out of a library is not censorship. Okay? Again, what you want to do is you want to give children the appropriate knowledge at the appropriate age. Okay? And again, I think that pornography should be kept out of school libraries, plain and simple. Anything that's something like that. If I tried to introduce a book telling children how to make a gun, can you imagine the outroar, the uproar at that? And probably justifiably too, because you don't teach children how to make guns. Okay? Why are you gonna present them with pornography? Because that's what the issue is right here. Right? That's what, and I don't understand this whole normalization of this gender fluidity, and I don't understand why sex has all of a sudden become such a big deal. Let's educate our children, and let's bring in books that will do exactly that. Keep the pornography out.
I think you had to handle this at the board just a couple weeks ago, didn't you?
Yes.
He did.
Okay. So you're well prepared for this question.
Yeah. Appropriate books at the appropriate age. I'm gonna steal that soundbite. That's how
sounds
you
a good one.
decide, first part of the question, appropriate books at the appropriate age. And how would you handle parental complaints about these? A book like the book that they removed, listen, no one's saying, I mean, it's available for purchase, or even if you can't purchase it, take it out of the library somewhere else, with your family, with your parents. So this is just back to that for me again. I don't think it belongs in a public school. I think it's something that parents and families can decide. That's their jurisdiction and their discretion. If their kid wants to read the book, go get it. Doesn't belong in the school, like many other books that could be like that one.
Okay.
Could I add something to that?
Sure.
There was one parent that came up and said that, this book might save a life. You're not going to save a life with a pornographic comic book. It's just, and this is to the point that we're getting at. These arguments are getting ridiculous right now. Right? If some child is really that confused about their gender, they need to go see a therapist. They need to get professional counseling, not to read a comic book.
Thank you. Question 9. Safety is always a concern for everyone. Given the rise in school violence in America and threats that have been made even in our own district, do you have ideas pertaining to how to make our schools safer, including any discipline policies, police presence, proactive training? How do we keep our schools safe? Right, Dan?
Well, yeah, this is a good question, because try as hard as you might, I think that's always a danger, and I think that people just have to be on the lookout for that. I think that you need policies and procedures that will identify people that are coming into the school. And I do think that, and again, this is beyond me, but I do think that continual training of teachers, administrators, staff in school is something that's necessary. This is, again, this is something that you didn't see when I was growing up, people coming in with guns, students coming in with guns and shooting each other. So this has become a problem, and it does have to be dealt with, absolutely.
Okay, Carrie?
So you said something earlier in reference to our society and just being civilized and just knowing right from wrong, right? We're all supposed to know that. So I wish to kind of bring this back to, you know, we don't live in a utopia, and it's unfortunate, but the genesis of all of this, we can't go back, and we can't start at the beginning and stop and start again. So since we cannot do that, you know, I think I'd hope that people would live in a civilized manner, but they're not. There has to be greater accountability. There have to be stiffer consequences, but we would hope that we don't get there. So I, from home, teach my children, of course, about their own accountability and what they do or don't do and shouldn't do and what's acceptable and what's not. Again, they're human. They'll err. They'll, you know, goof. But also to be hyper aware and hyper vigilant of their surroundings. So I try, first and foremost, to empower them to make sure that they handle themselves correctly and that they watch their surroundings. As far as what we can do and what we must do on the school grounds, you know, I think it's a sticky business here too. If you hyper police a campus, you almost create, there's an argument that it could manifest, you know, perhaps, why do we need all, like if I go outside of my house and there's 3 police cars on the street, I feel like, is my safety, you know, in question? Like, so it's kind of tough. But there are school resource officers and school safety officers, and I think, unfortunately, in this day and age, it's necessary. But I also think there's an interesting phenomenon where these kids are in this lockdown mode, really chronically. I walk up to my daughter's school and I can't get her. I can't go in and get my daughter. And that's tricky. So I think that there is constant work, training to be done. I think it's unfortunate, though, that my kids are sort of in these institutions now, and I can't have access to them as a result of, you know, some of these things that are pretty tragic. So it's difficult.
Okay, a follow-up question. I was talking with someone this afternoon after I put all these questions together, who works in the district and in the cafeteria. And it brought up a new question for me, is what should happen to kids who steal in school, who break the law? It's a constant problem she finds in the cafeteria, and even when they're caught on camera and confronted, nothing's done.
You're asking us the question?
That is a follow-up question. This is something that's happening now, because I just talked to the person this afternoon. Kids who steal, they're stealing food on purpose, they're caught, and what kind of consequences should come upon kids who are caught breaking the law in school?
In my opinion, one time, they get a pass. Second time, the police get involved.
Okay, Carrie?
You specifically mentioned food, so that kind of tickles my mommy nerve, and it makes me wonder why. So you didn't say a cell phone or a computer or something of
They
value?
work in the cafeteria,
Okay,
so they're constantly
Okay.
finding it.
okay. If it's food and it's a need, and, okay.
Not
all
a
right.
need.
So then, listen, disciplinary, no doubt about it, right? 1 strike, 2 strike type of thing. You just can't have it because it's the greater good again, right? So we got to watch this good of the few over the good of many, and if a kid's disrupting and doing things like that, why wouldn't it be any different than the rest of the environment of the school? The other thing is, I think we're soft on everything anymore, right? So we need to not be so soft on these offenses. And 1 strike, 2 strike, and it just amplifies.
Okay, and another follow-up. She caught 2 kids in the corner of the cafeteria having sex. What should happen with that? Yeah, that actually happened, so. I know that's just a shock look, but
Yeah,
this is what's happening on campus.
Wow. Yeah, well, they get sent home. They get sent home. The parents need to be notified. These kids need to go to some sort of counseling. And again, if it happens again, then it's expulsion. I mean, it's just, it's a school, not a motel. So.
I know, it's a shocking statement and question that goes with it.
What age, do you know the grade?
High school.
It was high school. So professionally, I heard of something at a meeting with adults, they lost their job. So my first reaction was expulsion. Like, that was my first reaction. I don't know, maybe that's too much, but how is it, who else was affected by it, right? Are there victims that saw this? And I consider them victims. Did someone else see this? Someone found them, so now there's other people affected by this behavior.
Part of the reason I wanted to bring that question up is that a lot of the things we talked about earlier have consequences. Here's one of the consequences. When we're not teaching our children, there are consequences to actions then, and they're not given consequences, you just continue to promote it. So that's just really a follow-up to this whole concern for safety. If there's not safety even to respect food, should be pretty simple. Where's it going to go? So this district has to be able to start handling some of these things, because these are things that are currently happening. And the worker there is not getting backup. Okay. 10, this is one you can probably wax a little eloquent on. Christians believe we are stewards of what is entrusted to us by God, and that we will give an account to him of what he has entrusted to us. As those funding the school district, we therefore believe it's important that fiscal responsibility is incumbent. How do you plan on encouraging responsible spending and budgeting the Wappingers Central School District? And then a follow-up, are you aware of how the American Opportunity Funds, the COVID relief funds, were spent in this district, and how should unexpected funds, such as those were, be spent? So.
So this is a really good question. And one of the things that I was doing my white knuckling about in 2020, you know, as I get my bill that my taxes are going to go up, and, you know, 2020 going into 21, and realizing that the lights didn't go on and the buses didn't move. And here we are. So, yeah, how do I plan on encouraging responsible spending and budgeting? Well, you know, something came up earlier, we were talking about advocacy and things like that. It's really just rallying the sensibility of the fellow board members, because, and that's the most respectful way I could find to say that. So just rallying the senses. When I have an overage in my personal account and spend, I actually look at what bills I can pay. I actually look at coming clean, complete, getting in the black, like that type of stuff. I don't look at digging deeper, or what I would do if something needs to be done, I would take care of that. Are you aware of how the American Opportunity? No. Nope. I know, I'm aware of how I'm told that they were spent, but no. How should such unexpected funds be spent? Well, you know, I said that. That's, you know, what needs to be done. There's like nice to do and need to do type of stuff. How about we give some back to the taxpayers that don't understand why their taxes went up when they didn't run a bus or turn a light on? How about that? How about that? I just voted no to the Wappingers budget, and I was one of 9. And my kids participated in the music programs, in the sports, heavy. My son, my oldest, played piano since he was 4 years old. He plays 12 instruments today, and that's because I took him to private lessons. But the point is, he enjoyed the arts and the music. He also enjoyed football, as did my other boys. I think that there's a reappropriation required, right? I'm not, you know, about chopping and axing things. I'm about shifting things and finding out exactly what the spend is line for line, and maybe doing some of that fine-tooth combing and then reappropriating. So I don't want to take anything away from these kids. I think that that's what's required.
Very good.
All right, so I'm going to say something that's pretty controversial here. Why is the school budget so high? It's the voters' fault. People haven't been voting. I'm encouraging everybody here and everybody who's going to see this video, whoever, vote no on the school budget. We have to stop the spending. We have to stop the spending. People are moving out of the state because taxes are too high. So we have a smaller population, now with a greater tax burden. It's unmanageable, it's unsustainable. And we're going to, and very shortly, I see, we're going to see the consequences of this. Okay? So how would I do that? I mean, I would encourage all voters to say no to school budgets. We just have to stop the spending. Are you aware of the American Opportunity Funds were spent, how were they spent in this district? Why did we need COVID relief? If the lights aren't going on and the buses aren't running, why do we need COVID relief? Why do we need those funds to begin with? And what does the state expect in return for those funds? And how should such unexpected funds be spent? Well, as Carrie said, they need to be spent on what's needed, on what we need to have, and not just what's nice to have. And there are a lot of things that I would like to see, sure. You know, but we need to be educating our children. We need to be educating them in the basics. That's the priority right there. I love extracurricular activities. Nobody loves sports more than I do, but we need to prioritize, and we need to say no to some things. Tighten our belts.
All right, thank you. I happen to know there's some folks in the audience who will probably be able to apprise you a little bit about how some of these funds were spent. And one of the things in the district's always been frustrating is we vote no on the budget, and the contingency budget is also an increase. So it's no matter what you do, it's still going up. And then usually the threat is they're going to attack and cut out those things that are most important to parents. So on that standpoint, we know it has to do, the board needs to take action before it ever gets there, which means writing herd on how the budget's even put together. So appreciate very much that. So this is your last opportunity. Why should people vote for you? All right, Dan, why should people vote for you?
First thing I'd like to say is that, yeah, I do have a stance on a lot of things, and I may have come off as being harsh, especially to the other side, but remember that our motivation should always be love, and if we consider the other side the enemy, okay, which I do, I think that they are the enemy, we have to remember how a Christian is supposed to treat their enemies, okay? We need to approach them in love. We're not going to win anybody over by arguing or name-calling or anything like that. It's all got to be with a sense of love, kindness, gentleness. And why should you vote for me? Well, hopefully I've convinced everybody here that I do represent a biblical worldview. That is something that will motivate all of my decisions. I am not a leader. Okay, I want to make that clear. I am not a leader, and in this country, we don't elect leaders. We elect representatives. Okay, and so I'm here to represent the values and the wishes and desires of the people that are voting for me, the parents, the taxpayers. And hopefully I'll be a good representative, okay? God guiding me, giving me wisdom, my reliance on God, and to represent the constituency of Wappinger Falls, or Wappingers School District.
Thank you very much, Dan. Carrie.
It's about the children, right? At the beginning and the end, we all have to share that common goal and that common purpose. Sorry. At the beginning and the end of all of this, it has to be about the children. It's hopefully the common goal and the common purpose for all of us. I know that's why I got in the trenches last year, and I'm still sitting here right now. It's about the children. It's about our rights as parents to have the voice and to make sure that we are heard, whether we're on the board or sitting in the audience. I didn't do that enough. And again, the V8 smack in 2020 woke me to that. And I witnessed my children and a lot of kids suffering. Instinctively, I sized it up and I counted the cost. And I'm still counting the cost because what I didn't mention was 2 of my children, as of 2020, have been commuting to Ramsey, New Jersey, Mahwah, Ramsey, Don Bosco Prep every single day. And my daughter's in 7th grade, but I'm shopping for a private high school for her, and she may be out before 8th grade starts. So this is what it's done. But when I say count the cost, I mean there's so much collateral damage for these kids being isolated. My boys were pulled from sports. My oldest son graduated in a parking lot. I tried to fight that. So again, I'm just acting in the role that was bestowed upon me by God, and I have some pretty amazing kids. So that makes it my responsibility. That's why you should vote for me, because I'll make it my responsibility to make sure that everyone's kids are first at the beginning and the end of everything that we do, and that parents' rights are very relevant, are always right in the forefront with these kids, because that's who's responsible for these decisions. Again, voting for me means that I'm not okay with the status quo. I said we should be disruptors, and positive tension, creating that positive tension, you know, honoring the diversity of thoughts, honoring the diversity of all these kids. We have to remember that we all have a common goal. And voting for me, I'm going to make sure that in the forefront for me, it's always parental rights and fiscal responsibility. How are we spending our money, and why? And honestly, of, by, and for the people, right? So we need to be our own voice. As Dan said, we're not leaders. I'm not here because I think I have some kind of power or I'm in some popularity contest. I'm here because I give a hoot about what's happening to my kids and other people's kids. And that's really why I hope you vote for me. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for coming. It's been an honor to be able to host this evening. And well, we're going to pray and ask God's blessing upon what's going to happen in the elections to come up. Father, we are very grateful that regardless of whatever man does, ultimately you are sovereign. And we know you are moving toward carrying out your own plan. And often what man means for evil, you will still use for good. And so, Father, even the whole COVID stuff that went on, certainly meant for evil, has turned out for at least a good of many parents being awakened to what's going on in our school districts. Father, I ask your mercy upon our own school district here in Wappinger, that when the elections are over, that you will have the representatives in place on the board to be able to honor you and in that way direct an educational environment that will be beneficial to our children, that they can actually then concentrate on learning. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much.